Hi everyone, my name's Juliet, and I'm a British author of children's and young adult fantasy and science fiction, and short stories for all ages. Today I'm talking about being original. The best piece of writing advice I have ever come across is this: never go with your first idea. Okay, podcast over. Alright, not really. Let's delve into this. This advice was for short story writing rather than novels, but it could just as easily apply. It came from a submission call for stories for a competition or anthology. I can't remember which. They were bemoaning how, when you have a theme for such a thing, the majority of the stories will take exactly the same path. Why? Because those people all chose the first idea that came into their head, the really obvious one that the prompt suggested, and went with it. Can you imagine being a judge or an editor, having to go through a whole pile of stories about exactly the same thing? You might say then, why have a theme or a prompt? Well, because that makes it easier to judge how creative someone is and how exceptional their story is compared to all the others. Now, I know what you're thinking. Certain groups of readers love reading the same kinds of stories over and over again. That tropes are important. That everyone is always saying, right to market. And you're right. A lot of people do like stories that are very similar, and even get annoyed if the stories aren't what they were expecting. But in a competitive situation, which is what all submissions are, you need to stand out from the crowd. That doesn't mean that you can't use tropes, but it does mean that you have to use them in a more creative way. So, how can you avoid using the obvious? The simplest way is to make a list. Write down all your ideas, including the really obvious ones, because if you're honest, you know what they are. And keep going until you have at least 10 different ideas on the list. 20 would be even better. When your brain is wrung dry, do this. If you have 10 ideas, cross out the first 5. Don't even look at them again. If you have 20 ideas, do the same with the first 10. Because you don't want to be using the ideas that the people who could only think of 10 came up with. Now, look at the remaining ideas and pick the one that sparks the most joy in you. Because if it doesn't do that, you won't be able to write it well. If none of what you have left does that, you need to think of more ideas. It's as simple as that. No one ever said writing was easy. At least, no one who's actually done it before. You can make your ideas more interesting by adding other prompts to them. For example, use your idea combined with a news headline, or a random line from a book you're reading, or a prompt from a random prompt generator online. Force yourself to go off at a tangent. You can get ideas from reading related books and stories. There are no new ideas. You're not plagiarizing if you take a simple concept and make it completely your own, so no one would even recognize where you got it from. There are many other options. I'll be doing a separate post on where to find prompts, which might help you further. Just don't be tempted to go back to those first ideas. But do make sure that the connection with the theme or prompt is obvious. Or similarly, you'll be at the bottom of the pile. And that's all I have for you today. I hope this was helpful to you and that the story ideas are flowing well. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any other topics you'd like me to talk about from my creative writing perspective in this kind of podcast video, please put them in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. If you want to watch me creating stories, check out this playlist. Thank you for listening. Until next time.